right? Because now you have Twitter, and you have people who are working on Twitter, and you have journalists, and you have academics, and they're doing a lot of stuff on these social media platforms, and these citation systems had to be like, okay, well, how are we going to tell them? Because you have to, I mean, if somebody makes a really, smart or, I don't want to say original, but nuanced tweet in a conversation, you want to cite it in your paper, you have to be able to tell somebody who's reading the paper where you got it from, right? So these are all, but again, this is because it's a pragmatic practice, knowing where to go to find the most updated information, which generally is the library. Right? If you go to the library, they have citation guides on the library website, and they try to keep those updated as often as possible. You can go to the citation styles themselves. They have websites, apa.org, the Modern Language Association, which is MLA. I mean, so there are ways to get to the most updated information, and that's what you should use as your guide. And not let that, because a lot of people just get caught up in the site, how do I cite this? It's not so much a question of how do you cite it, it's the question is why and how are you citing it, right? Does that make sense? So are there any questions so far? Okay, so what I thought we'd do is kind of go over an example. So this is my own writing. This is from an essay I did on Supernatural, a television show. And so I'm going to read it to you. And I'm sorry it's so light, and if you want to come up and read it some more. These gaps condition the audience to understand the rules of hunting and the emotional history of the Winchester brothers through a structure of gossip rather than explication. So the show employs gossip in the way that Baumeister et al. Observe when they write, quote, indeed, one might say that gossip goes beyond educating the hearer about social norms, it affirms them, end quote, and then I have page number and citation in quotes and parentheses. The hearer in this case is the viewer. The story of the Winchesters is in part a rumored story, which makes a certain kind of sense. For example, the fourth season meta episode, Monster at the End of this book, signals this structure when Castiel reveals that Chuck is writing the gospel of the Winchesters. A gospel is gossip. Gossip is fragmented and authored anonymously, somewhat anonymously, masking the source of information, so that one is always chasing the initial telling, the first event. So even internally, the show reinforces the viewer's perspective as part hunter, part gatherer. So where's the citation here?
After indeed, well, kind of all indeed, one might say.
Okay, so this is a direct quote, right? Yeah. And so I've used a direct quote, not a paraphrase. I'm not summarizing what they said. I'm using a direct quote from them. How am I using it?
I'm sorry, I forgot.
That's okay. So do we see the sandwich method here, by the way? Right, how are you seeing the sandwich method?
In the brief citation that you use?
Yeah. So what's the setup here? How am I setting it up?
You're, in your own words, kind of talking about, the topic that you're going to review. You give an example of the evidence that exists, and then you do the analysis afterwards.
Okay, so here, I signal up here that I'm talking about structure of gossip, right? And so I'm not a scholar of gossip. And believe me, there actually are, people who do a lot of scholarship on gossip, right? But I want to make this point for the rest of the paper, right? So the thing I need to do is not only talk about gossip, but to a certain extent, reinform a definition of it, right? And this is a definition, right? So it says, indeed, one might say that gossip goes beyond educating. So I'm basically, I've said, okay, here's gossip. Here's how I'm defining it, right? And then afterwards, the first sentence is what? The hearer, in this case, is the viewer. So I'm keying the first sentence after that to a word and within the quotation itself, right? So already I'm starting this analysis. So here is the integration. I've set it up, right? I've used the quotation, and now afterwards I'm keying it back to that so you can understand why I'm using it. So it's not simply dropped in there. It has a sense in terms of how it belongs in the paragraph. Does that make sense? So you'll also see that I have another source here, and that's the show itself, right? Monster. So I'm using an example from another source to make this. So within this paragraph, I'm actually citing two different sources. Right? I'm citing from this very general source about defining gossip, and then as I'm analyzing it, I'm using an example to show how that source works. Make sense? So what we're really trying to do, especially when if you're going to choose to do a direct quotation or a paraphrase or anything where you're bringing external source to bear, you want to build around it, right? So it's like, okay, it's a reason it's here. I use Baumeister, by the way, because they're fairly famous in terms of gossip scholarship. Okay, so this is an essay for a general audience, meaning it's not an essay for other scholars. This was actually posted on a fairly large website. So I wasn't trying to talk to other scholars, but I was at the same time using scholarship to try and make the point because of the tone of the argument. Okay, but I selected that on purpose. I could have gone with a more general source, but I decided no, I'm going to use this because I'm really trying to make an argument about this particular version of gossip. Okay. So you can kind of see right within this paragraph that system that I just gave you, selection. I have two sources here that one is primary and one is secondary. What's the primary source?
A direct quotation.
No.
Really?
No. The primary source is I'm citing the episode from Supernatural. That's my raw material, right? It's Supernatural itself, because this is the thing I'm focusing in on. This is my raw material because I'm making the interpretation of it. Make sense? The secondary source is actually Baumeister, because I'm not looking at their data. I'm just using their interpretation of what they've used in gossip scholarship, right? So this claim that they make is based on all kinds of scholarship with raw data and anthropological research that I'm not really talking about. Does it make sense? So the difference here, this is secondary and this is primary. Tricky. So does that make sense to you? Now, what I want to do is I'd like for us to bring out your artifacts, right? Do you have your summaries?
I have my summary.
Okay, so bring out your summaries, and what I'd like for you to do is I want you to identify within your summary 2 places. Sorry. So take out your work and underline the quotes or paraphrases you were using, right? The second thing I want you to do is read the sentence before. Does it set up the quote or paraphrase? How so? And then read the sentence after. Does it explain how the source is being used and how so? And then rewrite one of these paraphrases or quotations to be more integrative. And so what I'm going to do is walk around and kind of talk to you one-on-one. Sound good?
Summary from the actual video itself, but as you notice, it's right here at the end, and it just kind of disappears.
Right, so go back there and read from the beginning of that paragraph, right? And then towards the end, do you really want to end your paragraph with that, or is there a way of more integrating it? Okay? All right.
Pretty good.
You bringing that?
Yeah, I'm pulling it up.
Okay.
So with mine, I quoted it well from here. I feel like one thing I did have was you added a page number where exactly I got it. I'm trying to find it. source of that, or we figure out which page it's on. What they can fix.
Okay.
Go find out, I'll answer the question.
Sounds good. How you doing?
Good. Didn't really quote much. Just trying to find something to phrase new.
Okay, so I'll let you do that, and I'll come right back to you.
Alright.
How you doing?
Well, yeah, I have one of my folder summaries here. About G. I paraphrase about big D discourse versus little d discourse.
Okay.
Oh, there's definitely some edits I could do make it better. However, I like having this relatively refined. However, I can still get extra input on what I could do.
Sure. So this is a little stylistic thing. But instead of writes on how, I would say writes about how communication, just on, about might be a little bit of a better position. Yeah. So the first discourse refers to the identity of the individual, the power they have within the reference of the conversation. The second discourse refers to the actual dialogue and syntax. Following these definitions, dialogue between two or more parties relies not only on individuals, but context for development, current life development, and current standing of politics and various other social issues. So here, I might try and maybe collapse it, because I think these two sentences are a little overburdened. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And see if you can kind of collapse it and then make it a little bit more concise. Because I kind of lose it and then when I get to within the lines of any conversation, it seems like there's a kind of an abrupt change. Even though I know there's not, I just think the way the sentences are set up, it seems like there's an abrupt change. So maybe think about how you might reformat or rewrite this, especially this following, to be a little bit more fluid, to transition to how you're talking about this type of messages. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. Somebody else picked up that they didn't like that sentence either.
Well, I think it's not something they didn't like it. It just seems like it's really overburdened with language, and it seems like it can be just condensed down. And then that way, it makes it much more fluid when you get to within. How are you doing?
Plenty here.
Do you have any questions?
Not really. I think I kind of understand.
Okay. So you, is your question?
No, I figured out what I need to do.
Okay, so I'll give you, let me know.
Alright, I'm just looking at, was it the summary from my project?
Yeah, sure.
Let's see, I kind of figured out what I need to do, kind of like the rule of thumb ones, because like this part here is where I kind of like paraphrase what you're saying.
Yeah, brown comments, you single, brown comments. Many of those things that vulnerabilities and what the song is and deciding, like, I remember I said, you know, that we are right, things we do, okay. Okay, so yeah, so towards the end, I think they probably tighten that up.
Okay.
You know. And do, I was telling you, I'm sorry, your name, ma'am, did you guys? Your name?
Chantal.
Chantal, I knew it started with an S, but I was like.
It doesn't. It starts with the C.
It doesn't? Oh, well, it starts with an S sound.
It
does. I was saying that you might want to like look at this sentence around comments, because that's a really long sentence.
Yeah.
And how you might be able to just pare it down, because I think you might have a lot of unnecessary language there.
Okay.
Okay? And that will help you to facilitate the analysis that you want to do in the last two sentences.
Okay.
Okay?
This one. Josh?
Okay.
I think that's maybe it says like date. So would I put it there or is it? Oh, I put it on this one. 477. That'd be enough.
Yes.
Should have more
Yeah,
stuff.
no, that's it, because
Is that
this is, yeah, because this is
Quote
a,
here.
yeah, and also, I'm sorry,
It's good. That's
because this is the only citation,
Yeah.
so that you just need to, yeah. If it'd be different if you were, you know, if you had other citations.
I would put like
But
their
then-
their name, I forget with Tomas and the design.
Well, if it's in LA, it's their name, comma.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Oh, no problem.
Okay. That's it for that.
How do you do
You're just,
it? Did that help?
yeah, I'm just looking at the paraphrases I did, and I guess I use Eliza's quote well since the sentence before it kind of flows well and the sentence after, and then I'm looking at this quote and it kind of doesn't really flow as well because the sentence before and after don't really fit it, so I'll consider it like,
Well, that's good. And think about what I was saying in there is like, one way to think about integration is keying the words in the paragraph, in the sentences after with words that have been used in your paraphrase. Because that, a lot of times that will keep you on task in the analysis.
alright, excellent.
Let's see if anybody has questions. Okay. Well, so anybody, any general questions? You good? So you know to fill out the exit survey link. We will have another reading series probably next week, and I hope you come back for it. And so if you have any questions, please let us know. If not, then I think we're pretty well done for the day. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
The reading comprehension one was also reading, right?
Yes.
They both fall together?
Yes, yeah. They're both in reading. I'm the reading person.
Oh, you're the
How's that?
And the other one next week is going to be on Thursday, like 2 o'clock.
Probably, yes.
That would be great.
Probably, more than likely, this